I texted Steven and just kind of had the idea of doing kind of an NFL draft recap for the Longhorns who were drafted, the couple of guys who were signed as undrafted free agents, and then kind of predicting how these guys might fit with their new NFL teams, but then also kind of looking at where Texas stands as a program in relation to producing NFL draft picks. So, Stephen, welcome on. Thanks for helping me figure out all the technical side of it, but hopefully this goes smooth from now on.
No worries, no worries. Pleasure to be on and welcome all the Texas Longhorn football nation. Another draft cycle wraps up, and David, it's a pleasure to be on the channel, especially talking draft and celebrating the gentlemen that have moved on to the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely. It's honestly, I would rather watch the draft than the Super Bowl. I mean, that's how much I value kind of what goes on in the draft. I love that whole process, and then I love to see just kind of the ups and downs of how things change and stuff like that. So, I think heading into what we saw over the weekend, no big surprises to me in terms of who was drafted from the program and who was not drafted. I'm really liking where these guys went with their transition into the NFL. Brandon Jones to the Miami Dolphins, Devin Duvernay to the Baltimore Ravens, Colin Johnson to the Jaguars. What kind of stood out to you in terms of what excites you to see where these guys are going to go and who maybe best fits with his new team?
Well, I think everyone, including John Harbaugh, was very excited for the Devin Duvernay pick to Baltimore. Even Mel Kiper, who is very polarizing in the draft community in terms of the scouting industry and whatnot, but you hear him say right away, who's by the way a Ravens fan, say instant starter. They're going to find a place for him to play. The Ravens right now, they drafted Miles Boykin last year. Obviously, they used a first-round pick on Hollywood Brown. Those guys have pretty defined roles, but they do trade a Hayden Hurst in the offseason to the Atlanta Falcons at tight end. Maybe they're trying to open this up a little bit more. They also drafted a James Prochet out of SMU, who's another slot guy. But when you look at what Devin Duvernay can bring to the table for Lamar Jackson, from a scramble drill perspective, and how he can help open up that offense, adding speed next to a Hollywood Brown, being able to take the top off the defense. John Harbaugh mentioned Devin's versatility in terms of being able to play on the outside. Some of the clips they showed, and shout out, by the way, to Shane Buechele, who got to be in the highlight package a little bit for Devin and James Prochet, right? Both guys going to the Ravens. So that was a good look for Boo there. But, you see the one, obviously the big play he has against Oklahoma a few years ago as a freshman, and then the work and the productivity he had from the slot position, which is why he, ended up, being drafted where he did, or else he's probably not a draftable player heading into the season if the coaches don't move him to the slot. So right off the bat, I think everyone's just excited to see what Devin Duvernay can do in Baltimore from a fit perspective.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. Us as fans looking at what LJ Humphrey did and then wondering who's going to fill that super important role. Well, they stick senior Devin Duvernay in there, who had a decent freshman season and then kind of disappeared for a little bit, maybe for 2 seasons. And then he just had one of the best, seasons for a wide receiver in Texas history. But yeah, I love seeing how excited John Harbaugh was about him. And I guess the Patriots drafted another rookie named Devin right before them. And
yes.
I heard them say like, oh crap, we lost Devin, like they're Devin. But it was another, so Duvernay was still there. And I think that added to his excitement there. But no, completely agree with you. I think Devin's spot is, even though Brandon was drafted, before Devin in the 3rd round, I think where he goes, looking at number one, the highest scoring offense in the regular season.
Yeah, he's on a great team. Yeah.
Absolutely. But still an offense that's going to be geared around the rushing game that also added J.K. Dobbins in the draft from Ohio State. I think maybe he's the best running back in the draft. I don't know. But you pair him with Mark Ingram, Lamar Jackson, NFL MVP, still thinking that's first a rushing attack. Their top receiver last year was a tight end, but we all know the type of player that Devin is, never drops a pass, but plays like a running back when he has the ball in his hands.
That's where the value, I think, right off the bat, the run after catch and his ability as a runner, I think we're going to see some creative things with him in Baltimore that we may not have even gotten to see in terms of maximizing those capabilities of his versatility at Texas. The way Baltimore plays offense in the NFL is very, very, very different from the way everybody else plays offense in the NFL. And the amount of attention Lamar Jackson gets with his legs, you even see it, throughout the season, how many balls he's throwing when he's sucking so many linebackers and safeties up and guys that are able to make it into that second level of the defense wide open. Devin Duvernay is perfect for that, right? And then on top of that, jet sweep, right? All the things that they can do, motioning him out of the slot into the backfield, handing the football off to him. He will give them all of that. I love that. And I honestly, like, we as Texas fans, we're defensive of Devin Duvernay, A, because he was so underutilized for such a long time. B, not getting the Biletnikoff recognition, not getting any of the national buzz despite leading, being one of the nation's leaders in receiving, doing it every single week from a productivity standpoint in the Big 12. And yet you hardly heard his name called against some of the competition he went up against. All those brothers that got drafted at LSU, you saw what Devin Duvernay did against them. So to see a coach like a John Harbaugh, that was like my favorite moment of the draft for me personally. It was like, thank God somebody recognizes the value of what we saw in Devin Duvernay, and for him to call and say, hey, when you sending me my playbook, like, that's such a Devin response,
Right. Sure.
I'm ready to go to work, coach. When you sending me my playbook. So excited for him for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just a fantastic spot. Like you were saying about how they run their offense and what we know of what Devin can do, whether or not he plays a true slot position with the Ravens or not, but just the fact that that he proved to be phenomenal at just finding the open spot, finding the soft spot, and being just off the charts reliable for a guy like Lamar Jackson.
For sure.
Who's going to continue to move around, keep defenses guessing. What is he going to do? Is he going to run? Is he going to dump it off to Devin or a tight end, or are they just faking this, and are they going to go deep to Hollywood Brown?
So much misdirection, like you said, sucking guys in, and then you have Hollywood Brown, who's going to take a safety with him, right? So that gives Devin more room on the other side. Miles Boykin, all those guys. You still have a Mark Andrews who led the team in receiving, like we were talking about when we were talking earlier, just after the draft. Like, the possibilities are endless in their offense, and I think people kind of cooled on the Ravens after that playoff game, not really considering they had like almost a 3-week layoff. Mark Ingram was significantly injured in that game. Mark Andrews was significantly injured in that game. And they were cooled. All they've done is reload and gotten better. Like, now Mark Ingram gets hurt. Now we have J.K. Dobbins, right? They've really retooled that. So that's going to be an exciting NFL team to watch. Also, the Baltimore Ravens are the official team of the Texas Longhorns. Like, you look at how many guys.
Yeah.
They love our school, man.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And they even acquired Thomas from the Seahawks.
Yeah.
So they're pulling them from Texas, and they're pulling them from other teams as well. But yeah, no, it's fun. But I'm super excited for him. I already have his first official autograph trading card, and Colin's and Brandon's and all that type of stuff. So I'm hyped for all that.
That's awesome, man.
I geek out so much that I go after that stuff as well. But and kind of transitioning to, the other guys. I mean, Devin, I'm most excited about. I think that's a phenomenal fit for him. But one thing that stood out to me with the Texas guys, sure, 3 guys drafted. We want more. We want them to be drafted higher, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But all of these guys were senior team captains. So they're experienced, they're leaders, that their own teams, elevated them to the leadership captain level. And I think that can't be overlooked with these NFL teams that are looking for smart, mature leaders. And whether or not that translates into a 900-yard receiving season for some of these guys, whatever. But the fact that you're able to acquire, players and leaders like that of that caliber really stood out to me too.
I'm excited for Brandon. So I'm excited for Colin and Brandon for getting drafted. Anytime, especially as a 3rd and a 5th round pick, is something to be celebrated. Both of them were dealing with injuries and were not able to participate at the combine. Obviously, that affects both their stock. Starting with Brandon Jones, to your point about leadership, Brandon Jones took that to another level of leading by example. They used the example of what he did with the binder accumulation, of really diagnosing what every team was running from a scheme perspective in the league. And I really like what Miami did in the draft in general. Raekwon Davis, they reached a little bit on Austin Jackson, but they actually like made some moves where I'm like, all right, I really like what Miami's doing here. But picking up a Brandon Jones with the mind that I know that he has, I still think I really believe his best football is way out in front of him. Mm. You have the factor of how fast he is. His playing speed is very, very fast. They showed in the USC game when he got the guy at the goal line on, I believe it was 4th down, he got up to 23 miles an hour, right? And that over that period of ground that he covered, that's extremely impressive speed. I think when you marry the cerebral aspect with the speed, you can become a very dangerous football player. They've got to clean up his recognition skills of finding the football downfield. That's something I mentioned on my channel, and something he struggled with here at Texas. But he did show responsibility of stepping up when other people were getting injured. He was like, fine, I'll go play nickel. I'll go play this position over here. I'll come in the box. He was never afraid to hit. And the teams, that's actually what boosted him up. He was our highest player drafted and was injured, right? So that goes to show what the belief that Brian Flores and Chris Greer and that organization had in him to pick him at 70.
Yeah, absolutely. A guy like that that has shown so much versatility, but at the same time, like you said, has shown the willingness to do whatever's asked of him. I felt sorry for Brandon a lot this year.
Me too.
I just felt like there was so much asked of him. Hey, Brandon, play nickel, play some corner, play some safety,
right.
Make one-on-one open field tackles, blitz, cover deep,
How about this? Babysit the young guys that were back there, right?
Tyler
hey,
Owens,
we're throwing Tyler Owens into the game. He's got to get him lined up too, right? While you're playing a new position. I mean, right. and that's not a slight to those guys.
Everybody else is hurt.
Right. So, I mean, I think it was just very, very – and that goes into what we'll talk about later where, why we're not seeing some of our guys get valued higher in the evaluation process. But I think Miami, with the type of guys Miami's also brought in free agency, you look at a Kyle Van Noy, you look at a Byron Jones, Brandon Jones has that same type of temperament. They're all very cerebral guys. Yeah. And so it's very clear to me that Miami is looking for a certain type of football player. And Brandon Jones fit that profile for them.
Yeah. And no, I completely agree. And one of the big storylines with Miami is that they traded away Mika Fitzpatrick to the Steelers, who turned into, I believe, an All-Pro, which worked out great for the Steelers.
Yeah, he kept the Steelers almost single-handedly in playoff contention.
Yeah,
until the
yeah.
end of the season.
So they gave that up, a phenomenal, young player from Alabama, but to basically, I don't want to say Brandon Jones is expected to kind of fill that role, but they gave away a lot to to fill a super important position.
Right.
Um, me. I go from the game is played from the line of scrimmage out, right? So I value the big uns at the line more so than I do the last line of defense.
Right.
But like you said, from a mental standpoint, a leadership standpoint, those are the type of guys that are around for a long time.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
that's how I see him. That's how I see him, fitting in there. And also in an NFL division that's going through a lot of changes. Miami didn't have a good record. Yeah, they picked up Tua, number 5, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows what the Patriots are going to be right now? The Bills are kind of coming on with Josh Allen. So that's going to be some interesting dynamics there of who's going to step up in that division and attract that media attention, kind of in that Northeast. But
right. And the Bills, haven't made the playoffs last year, having that confidence in what they've done, and Josh Allen. I know they lost to Houston in a crazy playoff game, but New England still with Bill Belichick. Just he decides not to pick a quarterback. He goes to undrafted guys. One of them was Jamar Smith, who we played at Louisiana Tech. It's going to be very, very interesting how that plays out. How do you feel about Colin in Jacksonville? I have mixed feelings about it.
I actually do too. Jacksonville as an offense, I think, is putting together a lot of impressive young talent. They kind of lucked out on Gardner Minshew last year, who we'll find out if he's a legit starter in the NFL. Looks good so far. Leonard Fournette's fantastic when he can stay healthy, rushing and receiving. I think he had over 500 yards receiving last year.
Yeah, he caught a lot of balls, but they're also, there was a lot of smoke out there about them possibly trading him before the draft. It's interesting with Jacksonville because I feel like they're one of the candidates that might possibly look into tanking for Trevor Lawrence next year. I mean, so just some of the behavior.
Tank for Trevor.
Even and then that and the crux of the Nick Foles contract really messed up their cap situation. They had to trade a Calais Campbell. They have the Ngakoue mess that's going on with the owner's son right now. That's a lot. It's a lot of noise in their organization. They're not really bringing another quarterback to compete with Gardner Minshew. They're just kind of like, all right, I guess we'll just roll with this. And he was terrific his rookie year. Don't get it twisted. He was terrific, but
had the mustache and everything.
Yeah, I mean, he's his own brand. But as it relates to Colin Johnson, the things I like the fact that he's got a unique skill set compared to like the D.D. Westbrook or a DJ Shark in that offense. Yeah. So he kind of, sets himself apart.
Yeah, I mean, like Shark's not a little guy.
No, he's 6'3", 6'4", yeah.
Yeah, he's not a little dude. Westbrook is more of that kind of thinner, shifty, speedy guy. I mean, we saw him at Oklahoma, but given what they have now, and then they drafted Schultz out of Colorado, before Colin. So it's kind of a crowded passing game.
It is.
With a young sophomore quarterback who may or may not be the answer. So how much trust do they have in him? So I don't know. It's hard to say. And, when you look at the NFL, 900-yard receivers are a dime a dozen. They're all over the place. Even
especially with the way offenses are being deployed today.
Absolutely. Sure. the top 5 elite guys are 1,300 yards plus. So it's kind of hard to break out of the national attention to say a guy, is a star,
Sure.
when 800 to 900 yards is nothing, anymore. So that's hard to see. I would see Colin being used more as a tight ball, contested, red zone, sideline possession receiver. I think he's more athletic than that, but how many times do you remember him catching the ball and just breaking away at Texas? That really wasn't his MO. It was more of I'm just going to outbody you. I think he was a tough player, but that's kind of how I see him fitting in. But maybe he'll become that type of receiver that a young quarterback sort of uses as, builds a trust with in those contested tight situations. It's kind of hard to predict, actually.
The one of the things that Connor has, what's going on, John Matthews? I'm seeing some of the comments here, and Jamie Dixon, Swindell, Hookham, guys. In relationship to Colin, I agree with you in terms of what he does, run after catch, and he's had some ability especially when they did utilize him in the slot a little bit at times over the middle. I think the biggest things for me are, the injury history. He's got to stay healthy. That's number one. And then the consistency. There's times where Colin just disappeared for whatever reason. Sometimes it was maybe on the team, not getting targets, whatever. But there's also times where he did lack physicality at the, off the press, dealing with, you see the tape, which I'm sure the NFL was not fond of against Derek Stingley Jr. And I understand how good Derek Stingley is. No doubt about it. He's already on the NFL radar as one of the top players. But as a senior wide receiver with, all the time you've had in the weight room and your natural size, to have those issues separating is concerning. Now, I do think Colin looked very fluid at the Senior Bowl. When you look at him running routes at 6'6", he was one of the more fluid people out there running routes. But the thing is like, that's the guy I saw in the USC game a couple years ago when we lost. And he was unstoppable against Imam Marshall when he was checking him. And he had like almost 200 receiving yards. But then like the rest of the season, he doesn't have another game over 100 yards.
Yeah.
The one thing we found out with Devin, and granted Devin was playing a different position where he was being showcased. Mm-hmm. He was doing it every single week. Teams are starting to double him and bracket and do all these things. And it's like, and granted Colin missed a lot down the stretch, but he has to prove to be more than just a jump ball guy that's going to, come down with it, 50-50 or 60-40. And or else, what type of NFL career will he have in the long run?
Yeah, I mean, those type of guys can very quickly disappear. They can be on their third team in their fourth or fifth season, but yeah, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see, like D.D. Westbrook has had his, some injury concerns, through his career. But let's not downplay the fact that Jacksonville just wasn't a very good team. It's tough to go to a team that's just not good and come in as maybe the third or fourth guy.
Well, to your point,
through that, that's tough.
Right.
Like, I don't know, like DK Metcalf last year, I think he was like the 9th receiver drafted, but he went to the Seahawks where he got to play with Russell Westbrook and he had 900 yards.
Russell Wilson. Yeah.
I think he was the third rookie receiver in terms of yards and touchdowns. Close.
Right.
McLaurin, the Redskins, rookie he was even a late pick. The Titans, I can't even think of his name.
AJ Brown. AJ Brown from the Titans.
Brown.
He went over 1,000 yards. The receivers actually last year as a class, the 2019 receiver class was outstanding.
Yeah, Darius Slate and Hunter Renfrow kind of made an impact with the Raiders, and now we're talking about third, fourth, fifth round guys.
Exactly. So to your
Right.
point about Jacksonville being a bad team, if you're really, really looking for upside with Colin, he might be able to play right away. Like these guys aren't that good. Like, I mean, he might break into the rotation quicker than if he had gotten drafted on a loaded, team wide receiver. Yeah. Where he's going to really have to compete for snaps or wait if somebody got hurt. But with Jacksonville, I believe they have released Marquise Lee recently, or at least before the draft. So there's going to be some opportunities for him to earn some snaps right off the bat, especially if he can show that he can stay healthy.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I just, I think we all love Colin from just a mature leadership standpoint.
Awesome guy.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he puts himself out there. He's obviously a leader. He has a pretty cool YouTube channel himself.
Awesome YouTube channel. Yep.
Yeah. Kind of a behind the scenes, day in the life, type of thing. So he has that kind of mindset of he's obviously, concerned about his brand and things like that. So, but yeah, he's he's definitely the type of guy that's going to be okay, if you know what I mean.
I agree. I saw some interview with him recently, and he had mentioned, somebody asked him like straight up, like, were you disappointed or something, like where you got picked? And I like the fact that he was like, I'm thankful for the opportunity, but I definitely like wanted to be more than a fifth rounder. Like, I want some of these guys coming in. Like, I want Devin. Devin's never going to say it, but I want him to be a little pissed off. Like, when are we going to get – why haven't we gotten more of that recognition or more of that love? Because there were some other wide receivers that were drafted before those guys that got the benefit of the doubt from a upside standpoint or talent standpoint. And it's, in Devin's case, it's like, dude, I cut a 4.39 at the combine. Like, I am showing some explosiveness.
And his production.
And married with the production. Why are we not getting more of that that goodness from NFL evaluators is something that, not that those guys were blaming them, but I'm just saying, like, I want them to be humbled and happy that they were drafted, but also have that fire of, X amount of guys went before me. Oh no. So that's what I think that will help them.
I think Devin was the 16th receiver drafted, if I'm not mistaken. I think he was number 92, something.
He was
like
92,
overall. But now, this
also a crazy wide receiver class.
Yes, this may have been the greatest wide receiver draft class of all time. I don't know, coming out of college.
Yeah, coming out of college, in terms of the depth. In terms of the overall depth, I mean, you looked at Daniel Jeremiah said I think he had 19 or 20 receivers great in his top 100 on the board. That's 20% of the draft.
Yeah.
Right. And then you look at, by I think pick 45, we had like 11 guys drafted, and Denzel Mims wasn't even off the board yet at that point.
Yeah.
So it's like, wow, like you're telling me there's 10 guys that are getting drafted before Denzel Mims. Like, like when you start to see just the amount of folks that went, I mean, there's some justification behind it, but even a guy like, I think Antonio Gibson went before Devin. I could be wrong on that, but he went to the Redskins. And it's like, he's a guy who's very, very explosive, had a lot of, big plays, but he didn't nearly have the same amount of production or touches that a Devin Duvernay had his last year. So, there's certain things that they're looking for.
Right. In a pass happy NFL where, like I said, where a 900-yard receiver is kind of a dime a dozen, I mean, heck, the Cowboys had 2 1,000-yard receivers. You know this, but it also matters what a team needs. Like, Devin and Colin are 2 very different receivers.
Very
different type of receivers. So if you've already got your big, tall possession red zone guy that you can trust to outbody a safety on the sideline, you're not going to draft a second or third one. So I think that plays into it too, plus the depth. But at the end of the day, they got their shot, and we're going to find out.
100%. 100%.
Right. So kind of looking at the other point, you've already touched on it, obviously, in terms of how some of these teams perceive the Texas guys. Obviously we want to see higher round draft picks, coming out of the program. Now, I'm fully in the camp of I would much rather have just a winning team that competes for a title and that wins significant bowl games, get into the playoffs, as opposed to Utah that had 7 draft picks or something. I would rather beat Utah in the bowl game and let them have their draft picks. On the other side, yes, we want to see the program churn out more high round draft picks because absolutely, for sure, it's a big calling card for the recruits because let's be honest, these guys that have their choice between Ohio State, LSU, Alabama, Oklahoma, Texas, whoever, they want to go to the NFL in 3 to 4 years. And that's their dream. And they're 3 or 4 years removed from doing it, so no knock on them. So what do you see as kind of the overall, where is Texas in relation to being able to produce NFL picks? Obviously, Tom Herman, has now had 3 years. He cleaned house in December, so we have a whole new coaching staff come in. But where is your kind of perception of where this thing is in terms of being able to churn out, NFL talent?
I totally respect where you're coming from of wanting to win games, and that's priority number one, and wanting to be a consistent program again. I'm with you there, and that's what it sounded like to me that you were saying. Mm-hmm. However, I will say, if you want to be at the big boy level, the LSU level, the Ohio State level, the Clemson level, the Alabama level, you have to get special players, and special players turn into first round picks, and it happens in bunches, and that's what's not happening at all at Texas. Again, like the video I made, it was 3 guys in the last 10 years. I'm sorry, even if you're good, even if we're when I say good, I'm talking about we're over here competing for the Big 12 to get to the Big 12 championship game. Happy-go-lucky Texas. We have too many resources. This program is too large. The brand is too big for us to have 3 first-round picks in the last 10 years, period. And when you look at what's even the ramifications in recruiting right off the bat with what LSU has done, Landon Jackson commits to LSU right after the draft. JoJo Earl committed to LSU, I believe, last week. They're cleaning up and capitalizing off of that factory mentality. And you have look at this draft in particular, Jeffrey Okudah, right? That was a guy we were in there for, fighting for his services in 2017. J.K. Dobbins when he came out LaGrange. Baron Browning, I know he didn't enter, but that 2017 crew, those were all Texas boys that Ohio State came in here and took. What do you think Ohio State's pitch was to them? It had nothing to do with it was a business decision, and that's when you look at Keely Ringo deciding to go to Georgia. It's a business decision. Their parents are like, look, if our child right now at 17 is the number 1 rated position player, right? And they're a 5-star, because they don't just give you the 5-star based upon your production in high school. They give it to you based upon your upside as well. It's a whole formula, your measurables, what you've done, how you look at camps, how fast you are, all those types of things, and what you can become. If all these geniuses that look at the scouting process and say, all right, this guy's a 5-star prospect, I think it's realistic for me as the player and for a family member to say, if things go right and we stay healthy, we should be a high round draft pick. So now I have to stack the cards on what's going to get me there the quickest. Look, I understand yes, there's a dream to play in college. There's a dream to win national championships. But the ultimate dream for a lot of kids, a lot of players, is to make it to the NFL, to help their families financially and capitalize on their gifts and their talent. And Texas has to prove to these kids that they can be a vehicle for that, because the proof is not there that they can be a vehicle for the high. Yeah, we have guys. You brought this up to me. You're like, hey, Poona Ford's good, right? But like, why should we send these guys through this undrafted route or this low round route? Like, we have to prove that kids are going to come in here. Even some of the four, because TCU had 2 people go in the first round, and they went, what, 5 and 7?
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Texas Tech had a linebacker go like number 3 in the position or something like that.
Yeah. And for me, man, I just see it as there's something missing right now, and Tom Herman has to be the one to figure this out. It can't be anybody else. There's something missing in terms of the credibility with evaluators. And we'll see, because right now you see mocks right now for 2021. You see Sam Cosmi on the mock list. Caden Stearns is getting a lot of love. Hopefully Joseph Osai can follow behind that. Like, that right there is potentially 3 people. But I also remember mocks last year had Colin Johnson in the first round, had Brandon Jones potentially in the back end of the first round. And then all of a sudden, somebody brought this up on the YouTube channel in the comments, that, playing guys at different positions, they're not adept, and when they're not allowed to just grow at their position and be the best player for them, almost selfishly in a way, but all this, we got to do it for the team, and my tape drops. But then they go to the NFL and ball out again because they have stability, and it's like, that guy's actually really good from Texas, but he was a 4th or 5th round pick. We're seeing that too much, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's a good point about Poona Ford, or Malcolm Brown, who was at least Todd Gurley's backup, for a while, and has a shot, now with the Rams.
He got a second contract, absolutely.
What's the difference in talent between a 6th round pick and a free agent? Maybe not much, but it's a contract, right? It's a we want you on our team. We're going to get you a contract. You're almost guaranteed. Where, the wild west of undrafted free agents, who knows what's going to happen? I'm sure Malcolm Roach loves the fact that he's kind of going to be at home with the Saints, but he's going to have to fight his butt off, right?
Absolutely. By the way, quick shout out to Malcolm Roach signing undrafted with the Saints, as well as Zach Shackelford signing with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Just wanted to give those guys.
Is Zach going to snap it to the GOAT? How cool would that be if he actually
That would be pretty cool.
If the stars align and he gets in there and he's actually like snapping it to Brady, that would.
Well, let me ask you this question to your point. Would you be? I'm gonna ask you 2 questions. Would you be surprised if Zach Shackelford made the Tampa Bay Bucks, their 53-man roster?
No, I wouldn't
be surprised, right? Neither would I. No. Number 2,
another senior team captain, by the way.
Senior team captain, 4-year starter. Why wasn't he drafted? And I'm not saying he should have been drafted, but my question to Tom Herman and the coaching staff is, you have a 4-year starter at Texas. Meanwhile, LSU's long snappers getting drafted. You see what I'm saying? Like, we can't get our 4-year senior captain drafted in a 7th-round draft, but LSU's out here getting their long snapper drafted, to the point where Daniel Jeremiah had to even say, I'm sorry, Trey, I haven't done any film on the long snappers.
Right, yeah.
I think that's the type of credibility
just
that LSU has right now.
Yeah. I think even Jamar Chase got his rights secured by somebody, like through some kind of eligibility loophole or whatever. But yeah, number one, I wouldn't be surprised at all if he at least made the roster. Number 2, how many centers got drafted? I don't know. I'd have to go back and look. But absolutely. The experience that he had, the fact that he was a leader, senior team captain. You wonder where is the attention, and why isn't it at least justified?
I
To
was disappointed
at
with
least be on him.
I was disappointed with Shaq's tape his senior year. I thought he played very well his junior year. I was very disappointed with his tape his senior year. And I didn't even think, to the point where I didn't think his all Big 12 was completely deserved. That's just my opinion.
Mm.
However, I think with his 4 years of tape and all those accolades that he had, if you put that same tape out at Alabama, you're getting picked in the first 7 rounds. He would have at least gotten picked. That's what Texas needs to reestablish with the NFL is credibility. Because we made this point, we were talking just in prep, Charles Omenihu last year. I believe if he had the same tape at LSU or Auburn or any of these schools that has an N, a lot of the SEC schools, let's be honest, if Charles Omenihu had the same exact tape, same exact numbers he did at Texas, he would have been higher than a 5th-round pick to Houston Texans, because he gets to Houston Texans and he can play.
Yeah.
So which we knew.
Got better and better during his rookie year too, I think.
So we have to get back to getting that credibility. And
right.
If you're getting the special players, the wins are going to come. The wins will come. You'll see the team speed. You'll see the athleticism. But they have to figure out a way. Now, Bijan Robinson is a hell of a start when you start getting those 5-star tier. Now let's get Jordan Whittington up to where he should be. Jake Smith needs to be every bit the player. You got to squeeze every bit out of these guys. You take advantage of having a senior quarterback right now with a Sam Ehlinger, who's now running, I would say, a more player-friendly scheme or version with Mike Yurcich in play. Hopefully, this needs to be the showcase for Brennan Eagles to rise his stock, right? And Jake Smith and all these younger guys. Because the other thing I wanted to bring up that I thought about afterwards is a lot of these guys are getting the benefit of the doubt too, because they balled out when they were younger. They balled out as freshmen and sophomores. So like Grant Delpit got a pass there. And I think that's also why they like Caden Stearns so much, because Caden Stearns came in day one and was really, really good. So we also have to get our young guys playing better, quicker, with confidence, the way, and some of that has to do with getting those special guys. Like, you can't miss on a Okuda. You see him go to Ohio State, the rest is history.
For sure. Yeah. And I think I saw a stat that 34 players drafted were from Texas high schools. And then it was your typical California, Florida, kind of following that. But yeah, absolutely. I also wrote down some, because I did look at Alabama's the last 2 years. So 10 players drafted this year from Bama, all 10 within the first 3 rounds, 8 of the 10 within the first 2 rounds. Last year, matching 10 in the 2019 draft. So, yeah, I mean, kind of the point that you made on our call before this of, just the perception of these NFL teams, of how they perceive these minor league programs churning out their talent, where, Josh Jacobs was the first running back drafted last year. Didn't have a whole lot of production at Alabama just because he shared carries with Damian Harris and Najee Harris. And we've seen this before, but doesn't that speak to the perception of how these NFL evaluators and teams see these programs? And it almost seems like that they just trust that
absolutely
they're going to produce these guys and that they're going to be ready, even if they only do have 600 yards rushing, in their junior or senior year.
And I would trust it too if I was them. Josh Jacobs was only a 3-star recruit, if I recall. He wasn't even a monster. Like, Najee Harris was a 5-star recruit.
Sure, yeah.
Josh Jacobs was like a 3-star, turns into a first-rounder. That gives, and him having that type of the safety that went to the Jaguars, Ronnie Harrison was another guy who was a really, really low recruit. So Alabama's also showing you we're not just flipping a bunch of 5-stars into NFL draft picks. We're actually developing people in our program. So the NFL is seeing that. The other thing is the coaching ties to the NFL. these teams are showcasing their players in a way to where NFL scheme, with a lot of NFL schemes that are very NFL friendly when those players get there. Nick Saban and Bill Belichick coach together for a long time. They have a very, very good relationship. So when Bill Belichick goes and drafts an Alabama player, which I believe he did once or twice in this draft alone, he already knows this person, especially on the defense, we're pretty much running a lot of the same stuff we ran at Bama because you were coached by Nick. So I already know what your level of expectation is to versatility within our scheme. And how to be coached and how to learn. I do think, because you saw some players out there. Let's just keep it all the way 100 here. You saw Deshaun Elliott on Twitter made the comment about, hey, LSU and Ohio State are doing a great job developing players, and Malik Jefferson chimed in, and Charles Minihue chimed in about, like this is like a subtle jab at Texas. Do they have to have personal responsibility? Absolutely. But are they wrong or not fully justified? Because there's something else there in the evaluation process that teams are, like you said, Josh Jacobs doesn't have that crazy level of productivity, although his last year was really, really good. But you also trust, like when the Raiders made that pick, I don't think anybody was like, oh, that's a crazy pick. And you see how productive he is in the NFL because these teams know that they're ready. And my thing is Texas has to get there. Texas Pro Day used to be that in the early 2000s. It wasn't even, we're not talking about like 30 years ago. I'm old enough to remember when we would have guys maybe get drafted a little higher because they were Texas guys, because people trusted they were going to be ready to play in the NFL coming out of our program because we had a high level environment of development. So that's the challenge that because that go hand in hand with winning to me. If you're winning and you're like LSU, some of those kids need to write their first check to Joe Brady, and what he did. I'm serious.
Yep.
Because Joe Brady comes in there and their offense is fireworks all of a sudden. Now Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a first round pick, so
He goes from champs to champs.
I'm looking at some of the comments, and I think it's a very interesting discussion.
I think your boy John said in any other draft, Devin would have been a second round pick.
I agree with that. There was one draft I was looking at like a couple years ago, or maybe it was more a couple years ago, the draft where Tennessee took, was it Corey Davis from like Central Michigan or Western Michigan with
Titans?
like the Titans. They took him with like the 5th overall pick, and I'm like looking at that draft from a receiver standpoint. I'm like, there's like 10, 15 kids in this draft that had a better grade than like almost all the receivers in that draft.
Yeah.
So it just goes to show year to year.
Yeah, definitely. You can definitely look at a depletion in that type of talent. But I also think that having a really solid third best receiver on your team, whether that's your tight end or whatever, is incredibly valuable. Heck, even the Cowboys, who had Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup get 1,000 yards each, where Cooper's talented enough to get to be one of those I think top 5 guys. They drafted Lamb in the first round, who kind of fell to them out of nowhere. But you kind of see that how teams value those different guys. But where Alabama's going to likely have the top 3 drafted receivers this year. They already had the 2, and then next year in Jalen Waddle, likely.
And Devontae Smith,
Smith, but maybe it's 4. I don't know. Maybe it's the 2 this year and the 2 next year. I don't know. But look at the pedigree that they've produced. Amari Cooper, Julio Jones, Ridley, and this is from a
factory.
this is from a program that that really developed a personality of running game and great defense, but they're producing these, these.
Well,
these
Alabama's
NFL
Nick
pass
Saban. I give credit to Nick Saban there though, because he's adapted to the times. He went to a coach's clinic, and this was actually on Kirby Smart more so but he said if you're still running pro style offense in the SEC these days and you're a defensive guy, you're going to get left in the dust.
Yeah.
You have to open it up and have some elements of spread or be a full blown spread offense. This was Nick Saban speaking on this. So you see Georgia got stuck there because Georgia probably cost himself a national championship by not opening up, because when you see Georgia had 2 offensive tackles go, they had all the wide receivers that went last year. They had Nick Chubb that went. They had this year DeAndre Swift, right? Like all the weapons have been there, yet they've always struggled offensively in the biggest of games. Now they go to Todd Monken. They're actually going to be, for once, actually in a spread offense. So we'll see how that goes for them. But it's all about showcasing players. I saw in the chat, somebody actually brought up a good point. Said, it was Ruben Torres, and I want to address this. He said, why did TCU have 2 first-rounders if we're saying that these come down to wins? We're saying in terms of credibility with programs in the league when it comes to evaluations. I'm not necessarily equating every single first-round pick to them coming from the most successful program. But what I do know is when they're coming out of, say, a Gary Patterson program, Jalen Reagor was dynamite right off the bat when he got to TCU. His drop in production was deliberately equated with the quarterback play. When you look at who was throwing him the football last year, but what, Robinson the year before and his freshman year, he was fantastic, put out a lot of good film when TCU was really good. Same thing with Ross Blaylock on defense, and Jeff Gladney was outstanding, but Gary Patterson does have good credibility with the Jason Verretts of the world and some other guys they've sent to the NFL that they're going to still go to that school for corners. So it's not just directly equated to wins. There's programs that are out here winning that aren't sending a whole bunch of people to the league. But I'm saying, where are the inroads for us? I feel like we've produced some pretty good defensive linemen the last few years. How come we haven't gotten a little bit more of that love and that credibility there? So those are some of the things I'm talking about. I think it's more nuanced than just, Alabama and LSU and Clemson are making the playoffs every year, so they're going to have all the first-round picks. I think there's a little bit more nuance to that.
Yeah, that's a great point. Just kind of going back to that idea that, when some of these guys do get their shot, whether it's like, I don't know, Alex Okafor, Poona Ford, Malcolm Brown was a
first-round pick
on the Patriots, So, they've been around, for a while. But why weren't some of those guys perceived as, more valuable talents coming right out of the program? Did they develop more after they got into the program? And right when you said defensive line, it really made me think of how surprised I was when Jackson Jeffcoat wasn't drafted. And I remember that being kind of a pivotal moment for me of like, wow, like Jackson Jeffcoat wasn't drafted.
That's to Tracy Williams' point on here about defensive player. He was Big 12 exactly. DPOI. Yeah,
now he's in Canada right now doing well, but that's beside the point. But if he was the SEC defensive lineman of the year, player of the year, the Big Ten defensive player, where does he go, right? So I when you said that made me think of him of kind of that moment of like, what's going on here, kind of perception. But I don't know. It's interesting. It'll definitely be interesting to see, next year if these.
That's the key.
Maybe Sam Cosmi, if they stick with their perceived, possible first round. Obviously, depending on what happens.
So, David, you hit it on the nail. You hit it on the head. That's the key is next season, because you have guys now. It's a few things coming to light. Look, this was kind of the end. I know there's like a couple guys left, but this was really the end of all the Charlie Strong guys, right? And let the record show that none of them ended up as first round picks, even though many of them came in number one in their position group or in the top 5, what have you. That's just the way it ended up. Tom Herman, whether he can say this or did, coaches, whatever, hey, we tried to work with a bulk of these guys as best we could to develop them, and some of them did get drafted. Some of them have already had a little bit of NFL success where they've gone, and then some of them just flat, didn't have the talent level or didn't work out. Maybe it was a misevaluation or they peaked in college. But now this 2018 class that he had, that was all him. Mm-hmm. They were a top 5 class. They had big-time recruits. You have a guy even from 2017 in Sam Cosmi who has developed into a tackle that the NFL is fond of. When you start to see names thrown around in mocks this early, Caden Stearns, Cosmi, Osai should be right there. Their mission as a staff is to keep those 3 names in first-round contention. So that means, hey, you guys can't play around with Joseph Osai's position anymore. Let him be what he needs to be and go after the quarterback and pile up numbers. I'm serious. Like, you can't because when you start messing around with people's position, like what happened with Brandon Jones and some of these other people, now the tape comes into question. So Caden Stearns, let him be a ball hawk. Let him do what he does. That's why you brought in Chris Ash to implement a scheme that's supposed to be more player friendly, easier to diagnose, see ball, hit ball, see ball, go get ball. I need those guys because that will be a key sign, a key indicator. When you come into a season, like I talked about Andrew Thomas, the tackle from Georgia, he came in and people were talking about him being a top 10 pick because he decided to come back to school. And they were like, will that pay off for him? And you know what Georgia can now sell to their recruits? It did. He was the number 4 pick to the Giants. He came back. We made sure that he was still a first-round pick. That's a bucket in Kirby Smart's cap when he goes to recruit. That's how they get people like Keely Ringo. Tom Herman needs this. He needs those 3 people to go in the first round so he has some level of credibility to go into young people's homes and say, look, the guys we've been evaluating and bringing in, look at what they've become and the money and the financial opportunities they're going to have right off the bat leaving our school.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that isn't that kind of what one of Mac Brown's calling cards was? I mean, whether it was, I don't know, Leonard Davis, Mike Williams, Brian Arakpo, Roy Williams, those type of first rounders was his ability to be,
those were high first rounders too, man. Those guys were top 10 picks.
And to keep them in the program for 4 years or 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, Cosmi, they have to get it has to be priority amongst the staff. Even Sam Ehlinger. Look, some of the names I've been seeing thrown around after, because I think there's obviously tiers in every group, right? You're going to have the Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, and a lot of people are hot on the North Dakota quarterback right now. That was a redshirt freshman. I think his name's Trey Lance. So you got, I'm serious, they're already talking about that North Dakota quarterback like he's the second coming to Carson Wentz. So you got 3.
I think all the North Dakota quarterbacks get like 3 levels of a boost now. Yeah.
Hey, they have NFL ties now. People trust their program and their evaluation on how they develop those quarterbacks, even though they're playing at a different level competition. But you can have 4 or 5 quarterbacks go in the first round. So is Sam Ehlinger going to be able? Are we going to showcase him? And this is also whether to people's eyes, do you think he has pro style ability or not from an arm talent perspective and all that? But shoot, coming into last season, how many people had Joe Burrow as a first round pick? How many people had Joe Burrow as the first overall pick? These same people had Joe Burrow at the as a marginal 6th, 7th round quarterback prospect. But Joe Brady comes in, changes his life. So Mike Yurcich, I'm not forgetting about Sam Ehlinger. Yeah, Joseph Osai needs to be a first-round pick. Sam Cosmi, you guys got to get him there. Same thing with Caden Stearns. But I'm not forgetting about Sam Ehlinger, because if he's going to feed all these mouths, and if he can show an increase in productivity and efficiency after losing a Devin Duvernay, after losing a Colin Johnson, to me that only helps his stock as a leader and a prospect at the next level.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point about Burrow in last year. And I saw a clip after he was drafted Thursday, but he just kind of said, yeah, I just wasn't very good, last year. I just wasn't I wasn't there yet. Like kind of like what you were saying. Sure, coming in a completely new offensive coordinator, a completely new philosophy, who he had the Bolitnikoff Award winner, that he was throwing to, who wasn't even eligible to be drafted this year.
Yeah, Jamar Chase would have been wide receiver 1 in this draft.
Absolutely. Plus Jefferson, plus, Edwards-Helaire, who did end up being the first running back taken. Burrow just kind of admitted, I just wasn't that good last year. Basically he was saying like he wasn't just ready yet. But yeah, it's really interesting to see what a year can do. Justin Fields, who leaves Georgia to go to Ohio State, kind of the same thing. 1 year. Yeah,
those guys. Yeah, Justin Fields was balling right away. That's going to help his credibility with NFL scouts. You went to a new program, got installed within a few months, we're rocking and rolling. Yeah, scouts love that, right? And then maybe they beat Clemson if he doesn't have the knee stuff he's dealing with in that playoff game, and they still were right there. And some people think that they were jobbed by the refs. So, I mean, those guys. But Justin Fields as a prospect was a top tier, can't miss. Trevor Lawrence was top tier, can't miss. So, it's not like Sam Ehlinger, but Sam Ehlinger wasn't a scrub prospect. He was a 4-star, Elite 11, was right there competing with a lot of these guys.
Program in Texas,
yeah, it's always been and the thing too is nothing is too big for him. He can handle, whatever you put on his plate, and he's also got great football IQ. He's just got to clean up the stuff mechanically and show that improvement from an arm talent perspective that we just saw happen with somebody else. So I'm not counting out Sam Ehlinger just yet in terms of as a prospect for the NFL.
Yeah, no, and I think he's going to get a shot, right? Like, we look at Colt McCoy, the winningest college quarterback of all time, and he's at least been in the league, for going on 11 years now. So. Yeah, and
I would argue that Sam probably has more physical tools than Colt did, outside of just natural accuracy. Yeah. Overall, especially with the way the league's being played right now, it's just the productivity. I agree, Tracy. If Sam gets if they go to the Big 12 championship and make a run for the playoffs with this crew that he has right now, he will be in the top 5 quarterback conversation. Because I don't see like where he has the horrible hitch in his throwing motion. To me, like there's certain things you look out for, like with Tebow, for example, who still went the first round.
Yeah.
But like you see, he had like the wind up, exactly, like just an awful throwing motion. Sam Ehlinger doesn't have that. There's things he can clean up with his footwork and his eyes and moving things around. But in terms of, he doesn't have the greatest release in the world, but he has a very good release. So and very rarely do I'm like, oh, he can't make that throw. You go back and watch the LSU tape. He made some NFL throws in that game, especially in the second half.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, where I thought he was ready to take off then. Now he regressed, and maybe some of that had to do with some injury stuff that we weren't really privy to as fans. But I don't know. I just think that we can't count him out just yet.
Yeah, we'll see. But I'll go back to that idea of bringing guys onto your organization that are just smart leaders. A team captain as a junior. I think that stuff matters too. Whether or not he ends up being a starter for 6, 7, 8+ years in the NFL. Sure. I don't know. Watching the draft, one of the
Brandon Jones is going to make a lot of money that way in the NFL, like you just said.
Well, one of the guys made a good point of like, you know what? the quarterback position is pretty okay right now in the NFL. You know, whether it's, you know, guys that are on their way out, like Phillip Rivers or Brady.
I agree with that.
Whatever. And then the new younger guys that look pretty solid, obviously Lamar Jackson, Mahomes, Josh Allen with Buffalo, you know, so there's only 32 starting spots anyway, you know, so yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of what do you deem to be, you know, worthy of being, you know, having a spot in the league and in getting your shot. So no, I agree. I mean, I think the production is there. I think the way the league is accepting these type of quarterbacks and the offense and stuff like that is obviously changing. I would love to see Vince Young being drafted right now as opposed to back in 2006.
Absolutely. So. I agree.
But
yeah,
man,
I mean,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, I just think that with where we are with so many of the guys on our team, I think about a Keandre Coburn who, you know, however he gets showcased in this defense, could he have I want guys to have that opportunity to have a real conversation with the NFL. We've had people, submit their name to the advisory board, and all of them always come back, oh, you should return to school. But I want some guys to start turning their names in. Maybe BJ Foster's able to clean up his tape and make that next step. Because if you're BJ Foster watching NFL draft and you see like the CeeDee Lamb highlights, and I know he was injured, but like just seeing there was so many Texas highlights during the draft, or Texas lowlights, I should say, when they're showing certain guys. Although I noticed when DeAndre Swift was drafted, they refused to show the Georgia Sugar Bowl.
The Sugar Bowl, yeah.
Yeah, where we.
I also did not see Devin trucking
on Grant Delpit. Yeah,
I didn't see that during the draft. I've seen it.
How's that not in Devin's highlight clip? Like, but we're showing our guys get, and granted, yeah, we deserve it, but like, shoot, like let's call it both ways, ESPN. Anyway, but guys like that, man, and even some of the youth in our program, we have a young corner right now who we've seen just bits and pieces of him. Kenyatta Watson has all the measurables of all the people you just saw get picked. Are we going to get that guy to where he needs to be to be in the conversation, a couple years from now? That's what I need to see from this coaching staff.
Yeah, there's no excuses right now with the defensive back high school talent. I mean, you can go 3 deep almost, and just you've got to produce some guys out of there. I mean, Stearns is probably the highest rated guy out of high school from that group, but I mean, Estel, Owens, they're not too far behind. I mean, even Anthony Cook, the guys like that, not
they're all draft. A lot of those guys are draft eligible next year. You got to ask yourself, if Caden Stearns is playing the same amount of snaps at Ohio State, what's his draft slot? Because a buddy of mine asked me this about CeeDee Lamb, who was also considering Texas. He was like, yo, would CeeDee Lamb would he have been a first-round pick if he had picked Texas? And that's the question they got to ask themselves. I'm not saying put up the same numbers. I'm not saying even showcase the same way. We run a different offense than what Lincoln Riley does up there. But at the end of the day, we have to have the same end result. Because if not, it's just going to continue to be ammunition and losing these battles, and we're not going to get those special type of players. Kenyatta Watson can be that. I have no doubt in my mind, if Kenyatta Watson played for Gary Patterson at TCU, he would be developed to the best of his abilities. Now Jay Valai, I'm excited about. I'm excited about Chris Ash. I've warmed up to it, but they got to prove to me something that the other staff didn't do and failed. And quite frankly, many staffs, since going back to Mac Brown at the end, have failed to do. And that's how we end up with 3 first-round picks at the University of Texas in the last 10 years.
I know.
But I appreciate you bringing me on, man. I know we're getting ready to wrap, but
no, that's all right, man.
Very passionate about this.
Shame on us for not doing this more often. Every time we do this, it's just it's awesome. So yeah, we definitely need to do this more often. I wish we were doing a recap of the spring game, which would have been on Saturday. So, but we could have done a little double dip here with the NFL draft and a orange white spring game recap. But
That's one thing I've told people on our channel is any football conversations I have, I'm just having until they tell me there's no football. I'm having with the assumption that there is football, right? Because there's I mean, with the situation that the world is going through right now, this is a healthy distraction from the real problems and the real situations we're in, but no doubt about it. I don't know what the future is going to bring for the sport, but when we talk about it and analyze it, just the same way these teams just did with the draft, we're just going to go business as usual until we're told otherwise.
Right. No, you're doing a great job on your channel, just like with everybody else is doing, adapting, still putting out the relevant content. But guys, if you're not following Steven and also John over there at Fanatic Perspective on YouTube, go check them out. Obviously, you can find them on Facebook, Instagram as well, Twitter, Fanatic Perspective. But no, thanks for jumping on, man. Thanks for rolling with me on the technical difficulties. But
no worries.
Like with anything, we're just going to push through it and figure it out as we go along. So, but anyway, if you're watching this on the replay, guys, still leave your comments below. We'll still try to highlight them, answer them. We'll get this on the website too, TexasHornsFans.com. Totally live right now. Always trying to update it whenever we can, but go check it out on there. But Steven, thanks for taking the time. It was a lot of fun, and we'll definitely do it again. We should be doing it more often. So I'll take.
I agree. Let's sync up more often. Thank you for having me on, David. Guys, Horns always up. Appreciate y'all.
See y'all. Bye.